Have you ever felt a love so powerful it defied time itself? A connection so deep that even when everything else faded away, it remained? Today's story will take you on an emotional journey that might just remind you of your own heart's deepest wishes. If this resonates with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that touch the soul. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The hospital room was silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Eliza sat beside the bed, her wrinkled hand gently holding onto James's. 62 years of marriage, and here they were. His breathing was shallow, each rise and fall of his chest more labored than the last. The doctors had given him days, maybe hours. But Eliza wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. Not when she still remembered the promise they'd made all those years ago. "Do you remember what you told me the day we met?" she whispered, her voice breaking. James's eyes fluttered open, those same blue eyes that had captivated her when she was just 18. A faint smile crossed his lips. "I promised I'd find you in every lifetime," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "And I will, Eliza. This isn't the end for us." As a tear slipped down her cheek, the monitor flatlined. But in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The room seemed to shift, and suddenly, Eliza wasn't in the hospital anymore. She was standing on a familiar beach, young again, watching a boy with bright blue eyes approach her with a seashell in his hand. "I've been looking for you," he said. And that's when Eliza understood. Some promises transcend even death itself. James and Eliza's story began in the summer of 1958 in the small coastal town of Millhaven. The boardwalk was alive with laughter and music, the scent of saltwater taffy and popcorn filling the air. 17-year-old Eliza Montgomery had just arrived for the summer, sent to stay with her aunt after her parents' bitter divorce had left the family home feeling like a battlefield. Eliza had no interest in making friends or enjoying her summer. She'd been dragged away from everything she knew in Chicago, forced to spend 3 months in this sleepy town where nothing ever happened. On her first evening, she escaped her aunt's watchful eye and wandered down to the beach, hoping to find some solitude. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Eliza walked barefoot along the shoreline, her shoes dangling from her fingers. The cool water lapped at her ankles, providing a momentary relief from the summer heat. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the boy running toward her until they collided. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed, steadying her with a gentle hand on her arm. "I wasn't looking where I was going." Eliza looked up, ready to snap at him, but the words died on her lips. He was tall with sandy blonde hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes so blue they rivaled the ocean behind him. He was smiling at her, a genuine smile that reached those remarkable eyes. "It's fine," she managed to say, taking a step back. "You're new here," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm James. James Sullivan." "Eliza Montgomery," she replied, surprised by her willingness to share even that small piece of information. "Well, Eliza Montgomery," James said, bending down to pick up something from the sand. "I think you dropped this." He held out a small white seashell, perfectly intact despite the collision. Eliza knew it wasn't hers, but something about the way he was looking at her made her reach out and take it. "Thank you," she said softly. "You know, they say if you hold a seashell to your ear, you can hear the ocean's promises," James told her, his voice taking on a mysterious quality. "And I promise you, Eliza Montgomery, this summer is going to change your life." She should have rolled her eyes. She should have walked away. Instead, she found herself smiling back at him. "That's a pretty big promise from someone I just met." James shrugged, his eyes twinkling. "I'm good at keeping my promises. You'll see." And that was how it began. A chance meeting on a beach at sunset, a borrowed seashell, and a promise that seemed too grand to be true. Eliza couldn't have known then how prophetic James's words would be, or how deeply their lives would become intertwined. The next day, Eliza's aunt insisted she join the local youth group's beach cleanup. To her surprise, James was there, organizing teams and handing out trash bags. When he spotted her, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip a beat. "You came," he said, as if he'd been waiting for her. "My aunt didn't give me much choice," Eliza replied, trying to sound indifferent despite the warmth spreading through her chest. James laughed. "Well, I'm glad she's persuasive. You can be on my team." They spent the morning collecting litter from the beach, and Eliza found herself enjoying James's company more than she cared to admit. He was easy to talk to, full of stories about Millhaven and its residents. By lunchtime, she knew about his dreams of becoming a marine biologist, his 3 younger sisters, and his part-time job at his father's hardware store. "What about you?" he asked as they sat on a driftwood log, sharing a sandwich his mother had packed. "What's your story, Eliza Montgomery?" She hesitated, unused to people showing genuine interest in her life. "There's not much to tell. I'm from Chicago. My parents are getting divorced. I got sent here to stay out of the way while they figure out how to divide up 17 years of marriage." James didn't offer empty platitudes or awkward sympathy. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds really hard. But maybe being here isn't the worst thing. Sometimes a change of scenery helps you see things differently." "Maybe," Eliza conceded, surprised by his insight. "I'm not holding my breath, though." "You should," James said with a grin. "The air here is much cleaner than in Chicago." Despite herself, Eliza laughed. There was something about James Sullivan that made it impossible to maintain her carefully constructed wall of indifference. As the days passed, Eliza found herself spending more and more time with James. He showed her all the hidden treasures of Millhaven, the secret cove where sea turtles sometimes nested, the old lighthouse with its breathtaking view, the local diner that served the best milkshakes she'd ever tasted. With each passing day, the weight of her parents' divorce seemed to lighten, replaced by the joy of discovery and the warmth of new friendship. One evening, 2 weeks into her stay, James invited her to a bonfire on the beach. The night was warm, the stars impossibly bright above them. A group of local teenagers had gathered around the fire, roasting marshmallows and singing along to songs played on an old guitar. Eliza sat beside James, watching the flames dance and feeling, for the first time in months, completely at peace. "Penny for your thoughts," James said, nudging her gently with his shoulder. Eliza smiled. "I was just thinking that you might have been right. About this summer changing my life." James's eyes reflected the firelight as he looked at her. "I told you I'm good at keeping promises." There was something in his gaze that made Eliza's heart race. Without thinking, she leaned closer to him, and he met her halfway. Their first kiss was soft and sweet, tasting of marshmallows and possibility. When they pulled apart, James rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I ran into you," he confessed. "Why didn't you?" Eliza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things are worth waiting for," he replied simply. That night marked a turning point in their relationship. What had begun as friendship blossomed into something deeper, more profound. They spent every possible moment together, building sandcastles like children one day and discussing their hopes and fears like adults the next. James taught Eliza to swim in the ocean, holding her steady as waves crashed around them. She taught him to dance to the rock and roll songs that played on her portable radio. But as July turned to August, a shadow fell over their perfect summer. Eliza's aunt received a call from her mother, the divorce was finalized, and Eliza was expected back in Chicago earlier than planned. She would be leaving in just 3 days. When Eliza told James, his usual sunny demeanor dimmed. They sat on their favorite spot on the beach, watching the sunset in silence, the weight of their impending separation heavy between them. 3 days isn't enough, James finally said, his voice tight with emotion. "I know," Eliza replied, fighting back tears. "But what choice do we have? I have to go back to school, and you have your life here. James turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. This doesn't have to be the end, Eliza. We can write letters, call each other. And next summer, you can come back. Eliza wanted to believe him, but she'd seen firsthand how love could fade. Her parents had once looked at each other the way James was looking at her now. Long-distance relationships rarely work out, James. We're just teenagers. How can we possibly make this last? Instead of arguing, James reached into his pocket and pulled out the seashell he'd given her on their first meeting. Do you still have yours? He asked. Eliza nodded. She'd kept it on her nightstand, a reminder of that fateful evening. I have one too, he said, showing her an identical shell. I picked them both up that day. I was going to give you one as an excuse to talk to you, but then we literally ran into each other. He smiled at the memory. These shells are from the same place, formed by the same ocean. No matter how far apart they are, they're still connected. He pressed the shell into her palm. I promise you, Eliza Montgomery, that this isn't goodbye. I'll find you again. In this lifetime and every one after that. It was a grand, impossible promise, the kind that only a 17-year-old boy deeply in love could make. But as Eliza looked into James's eyes, she believed him. Their last 3 days together were bittersweet. They tried to cram a lifetime of memories into 72 hours, staying up late talking, waking early to watch the sunrise, stealing kisses whenever they could. On their final night, they snuck out to the beach and danced barefoot in the sand to music only they could hear. I love you, James whispered against her hair as they swayed together under the stars. Don't forget that. I love you too, Eliza replied, memorizing the feeling of being in his arms. And I won't. The morning of her departure arrived too quickly. James came to her aunt's house to say goodbye, his eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. He helped load her suitcases into the car, maintaining a brave smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Remember our promise, he said as they stood on the porch, postponing the inevitable. This isn't goodbye. Eliza nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She pressed her seashell into his hand. Keep this for me. Give it back when we see each other again. James took the shell, then removed something from around his neck, a simple silver chain with a small compass pendant. So you can always find your way back to me, he said, fastening it around her neck. Their final kiss was salt-stained with tears. As Eliza's aunt started the car, James stood in the driveway, watching. The last image Eliza had of him was through the rear window, a tall figure with the morning sun creating a halo around his sandy hair, one hand raised in farewell, the other clutching a small white seashell. Back in Chicago, life resumed its normal rhythm, but Eliza was forever changed. She wrote to James every week, and he replied just as faithfully. They shared the details of their lives, her struggles with her mother's new boyfriend, his acceptance to a marine biology program at a university in California. They made plans for the following summer, counting down the days until they could be together again. But fate had other plans. In April, just months before their planned reunion, Eliza's mother announced they were moving to New York for her new job. The move would happen in June, making a return to Millhaven impossible. When Eliza called James with the news, they both tried to stay positive, making new plans for him to visit New York instead. Then came the letter that changed everything. James's father had suffered a severe heart attack. James was deferring college to help run the family store while his father recovered. He wouldn't be able to visit New York as planned. Life continued to throw obstacles in their path. Eliza's letters to James were returned when the Sullivan family moved from their old address. Her calls to the hardware store went unanswered, it had been sold. Without social media or cell phones to bridge the gap, they lost touch completely. Years passed. Eliza graduated high school, then college. She dated other men, even got engaged once, but broke it off when she realized she was settling for less than the kind of love she knew was possible. Through it all, she kept James's compass around her neck, a reminder of a boy who had promised to find her in every lifetime. In the spring of 1968, 10 years after that magical summer, Eliza was working as a journalist in New York. She was assigned to cover a marine conservation conference, a topic she had little interest in until she saw the list of speakers. Among them was Dr. James Sullivan, a marine biologist known for his innovative research on coral reef preservation. Her heart raced as she entered the conference hall, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. And then she saw him, standing near the podium, reviewing his notes. He was older, more polished in his suit and tie, but unmistakably her James. The same sandy hair, though cut shorter now. The same strong profile that she had traced with her fingertips on lazy summer afternoons. Eliza waited until after his presentation to approach him. He was surrounded by colleagues, answering questions about his research. She stood at the edge of the group, waiting for an opening, her hand unconsciously clutching the compass at her throat. When the crowd finally dispersed, James looked up and saw her. For a moment, he simply stared, as if unable to believe his eyes. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white seashell, worn smooth from years of handling. "I believe this belongs to you," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered but still achingly familiar. Eliza stepped forward, tears blurring her vision. "You kept it all this time?" James smiled, and it was the same smile that had captured her heart a decade ago. "I made a promise, didn't I?" They talked for hours that night, filling in the gaps of their lost years. James had searched for her when her letters stopped coming, even traveling to Chicago only to discover her family had moved without leaving a forwarding address. He had eventually gone to college, throwing himself into his studies to distract from the ache of losing her. He'd dated occasionally but never found anyone who measured up to his memory of Eliza. "I never stopped looking for you," he told her as they walked through Central Park, the spring air fragrant with blooming flowers. "Every time I entered a room, I would scan the faces, hoping to find yours." "I kept your compass," Eliza said, showing him the pendant still hanging around her neck. "It really did lead me back to you." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony on the beach in Millhaven. Eliza's aunt, now gray-haired but still sharp as ever, cried happy tears as they exchanged vows at sunset, in the exact spot where they had first met. Instead of traditional rings, they each wore a band with a small piece of their seashells embedded in the metal, two halves of the same whole, finally reunited. Life wasn't always easy. They faced challenges, career demands that sometimes kept them apart, a devastating miscarriage that tested the strength of their bond, the eventual loss of parents and the responsibilities that came with it. But through it all, they faced each obstacle together, their love deepening with each passing year. They welcomed their daughter, Sarah, in 1970, followed by twin boys, Michael and David, 3 years later. Their home was filled with laughter, music, and countless seashells collected from beaches around the world. James's career took them to coastal cities across the country, and eventually to international research stations. Eliza continued her journalism, specializing in environmental issues, often collaborating with James on articles about ocean conservation. As their children grew and started families of their own, James and Eliza remained each other's constant. They celebrated their 25th anniversary by renewing their vows on the same beach where it all began. Their 40th was marked by a world cruise, visiting all the places they had dreamed of seeing together as teenagers. Their 50th found them back in Millhaven, now retired, having purchased a small cottage overlooking the ocean where their story had started. Life had come full circle. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in the same.